Shock. My husband kissed her in front of everyone, expecting me to cry. I smiled and gave him the divorce papers. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Audrey. It all started on what felt like the most perfect day of my life. It was a bright, sunny Tuesday morning in San Francisco, the kind where the fog burns off early and the bay glitters like a field of diamonds. I was standing in front of the large, polished mirror inside the company elevator, my hands smoothing the collar of my new silk blazer, tucking a few stray strands of brown hair at my temple. The city sprawled up behind the glass wall, a beautiful, sprawling map of my life, the Transamerica Pyramid piercing the sky. The numbers on the brass control panel ticked upward, floor by floor, a steady, satisfying climb. 19, 20, 21. Each soft, rhythmic chime was bringing me closer to the office where I had spent 7 demanding, exhausting, and ultimately rewarding years of my life, meticulously building my career from the ground up. But today wasn't just any other Tuesday. Today was the day I officially became the senior marketing director at the leading media company in the city. It was a position I had poured my heart and soul into earning, working countless late nights and sacrificing weekends. I didn't do it for the fame, or even for the beautiful corner office with the panoramic view I knew was waiting for me. I did it because, deep down in my bones, I knew I deserved it. I had earned it. When the elevator doors slid open with a gentle whoosh, a round of applause burst out, startling me for a second. My entire team stood waiting just outside, their faces beaming with genuine, unforced smiles, their eyes bright with excitement for me. Congratulations to our new director, my colleague, Mark, cheered, raising his coffee cup like a champagne flute. Voices echoed his sentiment from all directions. I felt a wide, genuine smile spread across my face, my heart pounding a triumphant, joyful rhythm against my ribs. It was one of those rare, perfect moments where you feel completely seen and appreciated. It felt like a lifetime ago that I was just a 25-year-old kid fresh out of college, walking into the same massive building, feeling so small and invisible in a sea of suits. I was full of ambition but had zero connections in the industry. Now, at 32, I had everything I had once only dared to dream of. A solid, respected career with a fantastic salary, a beautiful apartment in a high-rise overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, and a marriage I once believed was the very definition of perfect. I met Preston, my husband, in this very building. He was a lawyer, sharp and impossibly charismatic, working for a prestigious firm that leased the 16th floor. I was just a marketing assistant on the 22nd. Our first meeting was pure, unadulterated chaos. He was rushing to a deposition, I was nervous about a big presentation, and in the shared pantry on the 20th floor, he turned a corner too fast and spilled an entire large, hot coffee all over a stack of my freshly printed presentation documents. The dark liquid soaked into the pristine white paper, blurring the ink. I can still see his face, the way his handsome features contorted in horror, his cheeks flushing a deep red as he stammered apologies. He was so mortified, so genuinely upset, that I couldn't even be mad. He insisted on buying me a new coffee, on trying to salvage the papers, on doing anything to make it up to me. That one frantic coffee turned into a proper lunch the next day. Then lunches turned into late-night conversations over glasses of wine at a little bistro near our offices, talking for hours until we were the last ones in the restaurant. After just a year of dating, we got married in a small but warm ceremony on the beach in Carmel, with only our closest friends and family as witnesses, the sound of the waves crashing behind us as we said our vows. Preston had always been my rock, my biggest cheerleader, the one standing right behind me, pushing me forward whenever I doubted myself. I remember one night, years ago, when I was offered my first real team lead promotion. I was terrified, convinced I was an imposter who would be found out. I was about to email my boss to turn it down when Preston sat me down on our sofa, took my hands in his, and looked me straight in the eye. "Audrey," he said, his voice so firm and sure. "You do not have to shrink so others can shine. You're the one who lights up the whole room. His belief in me was so absolute that it forced me to believe in myself. That morning, the morning of my big promotion, he still kissed me goodbye like always, a lingering, warm kiss that tasted of coffee and mint. The faint, clean scent of his cologne stayed on my shoulder. His congratulatory text arrived just as I was receiving a massive, fragrant bouquet of white lilies from our CEO. "Proud of you," it read. "Let's celebrate tonight." I smiled, my heart feeling full and light. My life, at least in that perfect, sun-drenched moment, felt absolutely, flawlessly complete. Everything seemed to be in perfect, harmonious sync until that afternoon, when Daisy, my bright and cheerful assistant, walked into my new office with a stack of documents. "The proposal for next quarter's campaign is ready," she said, placing it neatly on the corner of my large mahogany desk. She lingered for a moment, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Then she lowered her voice, her eyes darting toward the glass door of my office as if to make sure no one was listening. Her expression held that specific mixture of excitement and hesitation people get when they have a piece of gossip they know they probably shouldn't share, but desperately want to. "Oh," she said, leaning in slightly over the desk. "Have you met the new legal consultant yet? The one everyone's talking about?" I shook my head, my mind still on budget projections and media buys. "No, I don't think so. I've been buried." Lately, my world had shrunk to the size of spreadsheets and strategic plans. I hadn't had time to keep up with hallway chatter. "Her name is Sabrina Turner," Daisy continued, her voice a near whisper. "Just transferred from the New York office. People say she's really sharp, a real killer in negotiations." She paused, chewing on her lower lip for a second as if weighing her next words. "And also very beautiful." I just offered a faint, noncommittal smile, trying to hide the odd flicker of unease that her conspiratorial tone ignited. I had no logical reason to worry about a new colleague, especially not on a day I was supposed to be celebrating my own hard-won success. And yet, a vague, unsettling feeling stirred deep inside me. Maybe it was the strange glint in Daisy's eyes, or the deliberate way she had emphasized the word beautiful. Or maybe, just maybe, it was simply that the deep, comfortable peace I'd felt for so long had just trembled, ever so slightly, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Looking back, the signs had been there for a while, like tiny, almost invisible hairline fractures in a beautiful porcelain vase that you don't notice until the water starts to slowly, silently seep through. It had started with the lukewarm compliments. A few months ago, I had won a major industry award for a particularly innovative campaign I'd led. I came home that evening, buzzing with excitement, holding the heavy, elegant glass trophy in my hands. In the past, Preston would have popped a bottle of our favorite champagne, lifted me up and spun me around the living room. That night, he just glanced up from the legal brief spread across our dining table. "Oh, that's nice, hon," he said, a distracted, fleeting smile on his face. "You're good at that stuff." And then his eyes went right back down to the papers. It wasn't unsupportive, just empty. The warmth, the shared joy, was gone. It felt like he was watching my success from a great distance. Then came the cancelled dinners, which became more and more frequent. "Have to work late," the texts would say. "The Chicago client needs updated documents." I was used to his unpredictable schedule. As a lawyer dealing with high-stakes commercial contracts, he never had fixed hours. But lately, it felt like an excuse. One Friday, I had made reservations at our favorite Italian place, the one where he'd first told me he loved me. I spent an hour getting ready, picking out a new dress, looking forward to it all week. Just as I was putting on my earrings, my phone buzzed. "So sorry, can't make it." Buried in discovery. I ended up eating a bowl of cereal alone at our big dining table, the silence of our beautiful apartment suddenly feeling vast and suffocatingly lonely. And then there was the one thing, the thing that really started to gnaw at me. His phone. It was always face down on the table. I know it sounds petty, like something a jealous teenager would notice, but it was such a stark change. Preston was never the secretive type. He used to toss his phone on the counter, leave it on the couch, even hand it to me while he was driving and say, "Hey, can you text my brother back for me?" Now, he kept it with him like it was a vital organ. If he got up from the couch to get a glass of water, the phone went with him. One evening, we were watching a movie. A notification buzzed on his phone, which was on the coffee table. He practically lunged for it, snatching it and flipping it over so quickly I barely saw the screen light up. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Just work," he said, a little too fast, his eyes glued to the TV, not meeting mine. The air between us grew thick with unspoken things. Every time he avoided my gaze when answering a simple question, or when I walked into the kitchen and saw him quickly switching tabs on his laptop, that strange, cold feeling in my chest returned. I kept telling myself it was just stress from a new project. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. That Friday night, we had a reservation at Le Paris, a cozy French restaurant with dark wood and soft lighting, a place filled with our happiest memories. It was where we'd had our third date, where he'd nervously confessed he was falling for me. It was where we'd celebrated our first wedding anniversary. I picked it specifically to celebrate my promotion, foolishly hoping that the familiar, romantic setting might help us recapture some of the old magic. Preston showed up nearly 40 minutes late. He walked in, his shoulders slumped, looking utterly exhausted. His tie was loosened, his expensive shirt was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I tried to push down the wave of disappointment and managed to smile. "Hey, you made it," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Sorry," he mumbled, sliding into the leather booth across from me. The meeting ran long. It was a killer. "Did you order yet?" he asked, his eyes immediately scanning the room, anywhere but at me. He pulled out his phone, glanced at the screen quickly, and then placed it, as he always did now, face down on the pristine white tablecloth. "No, I wanted to wait for you," I said, my voice softer than I intended. We ordered, and the conversation, which once had been the highlight of my day, now felt like a chore. It was stilted and half-hearted. I talked about the upcoming campaign, the new team members I was excited to manage. He replied with polite, non-committal responses. "That's great. Sounds busy." It was like talking to a polite, disinterested stranger. There were long, awkward silences that we never had before, silences I tried to fill with pointless chatter about the weather or the traffic. When I asked about his new project, the one that was supposedly causing all this stress, he just shrugged. "It's tough. The new partner is a bit demanding." I took a deep breath, steeling myself, trying to make my tone sound as casual and light as possible. "Is Sabrina working with you on it?" He froze for a second. It was almost imperceptible to an outsider, a slight stiffening of his shoulders, the way his hand paused just before reaching his water glass. But I saw it. I felt it. "Yeah," he said, finally picking up the glass and taking a long sip. "But she's just handling the documents, the research side of things." "Why?" "Daisy, my assistant, mentioned her," I said, swirling the deep red wine in my glass, watching the liquid cling to the sides. "She said Sabrina is quite the topic of conversation. That she stands out." Preston nodded, attempting a faint smile that was more of a grimace. It didn't come close to reaching his tired eyes. "Yeah, I guess," he said, looking over my shoulder at the door. "Sabrina's smart, but a bit loud, you know?" I took a slow sip of my wine, the rich, bitter taste flooding my mouth. I said nothing more. Not because I believed his pathetic, transparent lie, but because in that moment, I was conducting a little experiment. I was testing how bad he was at lying to my face. The answer was horrifyingly bad. The man whose entire legal career was built on precision, persuasion, and the art of constructing a convincing argument couldn't even look his own wife in the eye and tell a simple lie without his whole body betraying him. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I knew this feeling wasn't wrong. This wasn't just stress. This wasn't me being oversensitive. This was a lie, a big, gaping, ugly hole right in the middle of our dinner table. And as the waiter placed the dessert on the table, a beautiful creme brulee with a perfectly caramelized top that I knew I wouldn't be able to eat, I looked at Preston, the man who used to be my whole world, and my heart whispered a cold, clear sentence: "It's time to open your eyes." On Monday morning, I arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual. I had barely slept the night before, my mind racing with scenarios, replaying that disastrous dinner over and over. Despite the bone-deep fatigue, I didn't go straight up to my office. Instead, I parked my car in my usual spot in the underground garage and just sat there, the engine off, watching the steady stream of employees walk in one by one. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just a gut feeling, a cold knot of certainty in my stomach that was pushing me from deep within. At exactly 7:43 a.m., a gleaming white Audi pulled into a reserved spot 3 spaces away from me. A woman stepped out with a manufactured air of confidence. She had perfectly styled, lightly curled brown hair, a tight pencil skirt that accentuated her tall, slim figure, and high heels that clicked with an aggressive, crisp sound against the cold concrete floor. I had never seen her before, yet somehow, I knew instantly, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was Sabrina Turner. She walked into the lobby where Preston usually stopped to grab his morning coffee before heading upstairs. I didn't see him anywhere, but about 10 minutes later, as I was about to give up and head upstairs myself, I saw them. Through the large glass windows of the lobby, I saw them walking together down the hallway on the 18th floor, near the legal department. Sabrina was beaming, her head tilted up at him, saying something that made Preston laugh. It was a deep, uninhibited, genuine laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from him or been the cause of in a very long, long time. I quietly turned the key in the ignition, the sound of the engine roaring to life feeling like a violation in the quiet garage, and drove away from the site, my chest tightening with a cold, hard finality. That afternoon, the company held a small celebration for the marketing team's overachievement this quarter. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate anything, but as the newly promoted director, my attendance was not optional. The employee lounge was simply decorated with white and blue balloons and a banner that read "Congratulations, marketing team. A stellar Q4." Colleagues stood around holding plastic glasses of cheap champagne, chatting about work and weekend plans. I had just finished a perfunctory conversation with our COO when I saw Preston walk in, with Sabrina right behind him, as if they were attached at the hip. She was wearing a sleeveless red dress, a color so bold and attention-grabbing it felt inappropriate for a casual office party. It clung to her figure in a way that was clearly meant to be noticed. I tried to keep my smile fixed in place, a brittle mask, as they approached me. "Congratulations," Preston said, handing me a glass of champagne. His voice was a little too loud, a little too cheerful, a performance for the people around us. "I'm proud of you." "Thank you," I replied, my voice cool and even. My eyes flickered to Sabrina's polite, practiced smile. "Sabrina Turner," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Her grip was firm, her nails painted a glossy, blood red. "I've heard so many wonderful things about you." I shook her hand lightly, dropping it as quickly as I could. "Hopefully, all of them are true." Sabrina smiled, a wide, predatory smile, her voice as sweet and cloying as honey. "Oh, of course they are. Preston can't stop talking about you. He says, you're the smartest and most resilient woman he's ever known. It was a simple sentence, yet it was laced with a subtle, vicious sarcasm and a quiet claim of intimacy. It was a clear message: he talks about you, to me. We discuss you. I refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I just sipped my champagne and turned to another colleague who had come over to congratulate me, deliberately cutting her out of the conversation. But from that moment on, I watched. I watched every small gesture between them. The way Sabrina lightly touched Preston's arm when she laughed at something he said. The way he leaned in toward her, his eyes fixed on hers, creating a private bubble around them that shut out the rest of the room. With each passing moment, the doubt inside me solidified into something undeniable and ugly. That night, I sat alone in our dark kitchen, the only light coming from my laptop screen. Preston had, predictably, texted that he had a late meeting and told me not to wait up. I opened a new, secure email account and sent a quick, discreet message to Daisy. Hey, can you pull the full meeting schedule for the legal department for the past 3 weeks? I need to cross-reference some marketing initiatives. Please include all sessions Preston attended. A minute later, Daisy replied. Sure thing. Do you need me to list a formal reason for HR? I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Not yet. For now, just keep this between us. The first move in a game I never wanted to play had just been made. The following Wednesday, I had lunch with Brenda at our usual salad spot on Battery Street. It was our little tradition, a midweek escape from the corporate hustle. Brenda was my best friend from college, the kind of friend you could not see for months and then pick up right where you left off. She now worked in HR at my company, a place she wryly referred to as the company's confessional, a place where whispers and rumors were currency. She set her tray down, piled high with greens and grilled chicken, and looked at me carefully, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. You look exhausted, Audrey, she said, her voice soft. Seriously. You haven't been sleeping, have you? You've got dark circles under your eyes. I forced a faint smile and poked listlessly at a cherry tomato in my salad. Probably just the deadlines, I lied. The new promotion comes with a lot of pressure, you know how it is. She said nothing, just watched me for a long, quiet moment before she started mixing her own salad. But I knew she wasn't done. She knew me too well to buy that flimsy excuse. Audrey, she finally said after a long pause, putting her fork down and giving me her full attention. Do you want to know what people have been saying? I looked up from my salad, my own fork frozen midair. My heart started to beat a little faster, a nervous, thudding rhythm in my chest. About who? About Preston and Sabrina Turner, she said gently, but her words landed on the table between us like a ton of bricks. I said nothing, just stared at Brenda, waiting for the rest, for the confirmation of the nightmare that had been playing out in my head. Look, there's nothing concrete, Brenda continued, her voice soft and careful, aware of the fragility of the moment. It's just chatter. Office gossip. But Sabrina has been showing up at high-level legal strategy meetings where she usually wouldn't be needed. And a few people from the legal team have mentioned they always seem to leave the office together at the end of the day, long after everyone else is gone. It's probably just work, I heard myself say again, my own voice sounding hollow and unconvincing even to my own ears. It was a desperate, pathetic attempt to cling to the last shred of denial. Brenda tilted her head, her expression full of sympathy and a little bit of impatience. Audrey, listen to me. You're not the type to get suspicious over nothing. You have always been the most trusting person I know. But if someone like you starts feeling like something's off, it's because something really is. I felt a lump form in my throat, and I tightened my grip on my fork, the cold metal digging into my palm. I don't have any proof. You don't need proof to trust your gut, she said firmly. But if you want clarity, you need to start small. Brenda discreetly slid a small, folded slip of paper across the table. It had an email address and a name written on it. That's Miguel, in corporate security, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm not suggesting anything illegal, or anything that could get you in trouble. But if you need confirmation, he can give you the office entry logs, the keycard history for their floors, maybe even hallway camera access near the elevators. It's all internal protocol, standard security procedure. It's just information. I didn't respond right away. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was ringing in my ears, a loud, roaring sound. I carefully folded the small piece of paper and tucked it deep into my wallet. It felt heavy, like a key to a door I was terrified to open, but knew I had to. After lunch, I returned to the office, my head still reeling, the slip of paper in my wallet feeling like a tiny, burning coal. While tidying up my desk, I accidentally knocked an old USB drive from a drawer, one I had used years ago for campaign files. Suddenly, a thought struck me, clear and cold. What if I treated this like a campaign? What if I saved everything I was feeling, every doubt, every clue, like a strategy plan? Just like prepping for a major pitch. Not to jump to a conclusion, but to see the full picture clearly, without emotion clouding my judgment. It was the only way I knew how to handle a crisis, with data, with facts, and with a bulletproof plan. That Saturday night, I was sitting alone in the living room, curled up in our big armchair. The only light came from a single floor lamp, casting long, quiet shadows on the walls. Preston had texted me earlier that he was having a mandatory dinner with a difficult client from New York. The message had arrived at 6:32 p.m. It was a classic example of his recent texts, brief, devoid of emotion, and conveniently evasive of any specific details. I sat there for hours, not replying, my eyes locked on the dark screen of my phone as if it were a sealed door I was afraid to open. A part of me, a desperate, hopeful part, was screaming at me to stop, to just let it go, to trust the man I had married. I had never been the sneaky type. In our 7 years together, I had never once felt the urge to look through his things. I had trusted him completely, blindly. But trust, once it's been cracked, only needs the softest tap to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. A little after 10 p.m., I heard his key in the lock. Preston came home. He walked quietly through the living room, not realizing I was still awake, hidden in the shadows of the armchair. I watched from behind the cracked door of the study as he moved through the hall, his silhouette moving against the dim light. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his hair a bit tousled, and there, on the crisp white collar of his shirt, was a faint, almost imperceptible smudge of dark, wine-colored lipstick. My breath caught in my throat. It was so small, so cliché, it was almost laughable. But it was there. It was real. I said nothing. I waited, my body frozen, my heart a block of ice in my chest. He took an unusually long time in the shower, the sound of the water running a constant, loud roar in the otherwise silent house. When the water finally stopped, I took a deep, shaky breath and walked into our bedroom. His phone was charging on his desk, its screen dark. My hand was trembling as I reached out and picked it up. And then, a miracle of sheer, unadulterated arrogance, no passcode. He had never set one. Perhaps because he thought I would never, ever have a reason to look. But tonight, I did. The first thing I saw was a notification on the lock screen. A message that had come in just minutes before. It was from a name I now knew all too well. Sabrina Turner, are you home yet? I can still smell your cologne. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out, all the air sucked out of my lungs. I unlocked the phone and opened the message thread. What I saw was a complete, unabridged history of their affair, going back for weeks and weeks. What had started as playful, work-related exchanges had slowly, insidiously turned into sweet talk, then outright flirting, and then, photos. Undeniable, graphic photos. Photos of Sabrina in a luxurious hotel room, wearing nothing but Preston's white dress shirt, a champagne flute in her hand. A message she had sent him at 1 a.m. 2 weeks ago. I hate having to share you, but I know you'll choose me eventually. You have to. Silently, methodically, my body moving on autopilot, I took screenshots of every single message, every photo, every incriminating detail. I forwarded them to the private email address I had created, and then uploaded them to the encrypted folder on the cloud. The call history showed it all, too. Calls at 11:14 p.m., 12:27 a.m., 2:05 a.m. Most of them on nights Preston had told me he was working late, preparing for a big case, nights I had made him dinner and left it waiting in the oven for him. I placed the phone back on the charger, exactly where it had been. I even adjusted the charger cable so it looped in the same way he always left it. Then I walked into our master bathroom, knelt over the pristine white toilet, and threw up everything left in my stomach until there was nothing but bitter, burning bile. That night, I lay motionless in bed, my eyes wide open in the dark, pretending to be fast asleep as Preston stepped out of the bathroom, smelling of soap and betrayal, and slid under the covers beside me. He didn't hold me like he usually did. He didn't say good night. He just turned his back to me, and within minutes, I could hear the sound of his steady, even breathing as he drifted off to sleep. The man I loved was sleeping peacefully right next to me, and I had never felt more utterly, devastatingly alone in my entire life. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I left the house early, leaving a note on the counter saying I had an emergency meeting. The lie slipped out of my mouth with an unnerving, newfound ease. But instead of driving to the office, I drove to a small, discreet coffee shop tucked away in Valley, the one where Brenda had once introduced me to a lawyer friend of hers, a woman who specialized in high-asset divorces. Her name was Ms. Vance. She was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you, and a calm, reassuring voice that immediately commanded respect. Her office was minimalist and modern, a space that felt powerful and safe. I told her everything. My voice was surprisingly steady as I laid out the facts, the hand I was using to stir my coffee the only thing betraying my inner turmoil. I told her about the phone, the texts, the photos, the lipstick stain on his collar. Ms. Vance listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable, occasionally making a note on a legal pad. When I finally finished, my voice cracking at the very end, she let the silence hang in the air for a moment before she asked just one simple question. "Audrey," she said, her gaze steady and direct, cutting through my fog of pain. "Do you want to handle this cleanly, or do you want to handle this thoroughly?" I looked up from my coffee and met her eyes, a new kind of cold, hard resolve solidifying within me. "Both," I said, my voice clear and firm. "But I want to do it the right way. No drama, no public screaming matches. I want it to be quiet, professional, and clear enough that nothing can be denied." Ms. Vance smiled, a small, knowing, almost imperceptible smile. "I understand. We'll start with the prenuptial agreement." I nodded. We signed one. Preston insisted on it before the wedding. He was a lawyer, after all. He said it was just a smart financial decision, a way to protect both of our assets since we were both established in our careers. It felt a little cold at the time, but he was so logical about it, I eventually agreed. The thought of a divorce, of ever needing that document, had seemed so impossibly remote back then. "Perfect," Ms. Vance said. "Send me a copy as soon as you can." And from now on, she leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more intense. "Anything you uncover, an email, a photo from a security camera, even a timestamp from a keycard log, you store it separately and securely. You send copies directly to me. We build our entire case in the dark. You don't act. You don't confront him. You don't give him any reason to suspect that you know. You only get one chance to flip the table perfectly, and we are not going to waste it." I stepped out of her office building and into the bright morning sun with a strange, new feeling settling over me. The raw, searing heartbreak was still there, but it was now overlaid with something else, a sharp, cold focus. It felt like I was preparing for a major campaign, the most important and difficult pitch of my life. The final campaign that I absolutely had to win. Not for pride, not for revenge, but because I deserved better. And Preston was no longer part of that future. He was just a name on a file full of evidence that I would continue to build, day by day, piece by meticulous piece. His insistence on that prenup, which I once saw as a small crack in our foundation of trust, was now about to become my greatest weapon. After my meeting with Ms. Vance, I switched into a new mode, a gear I didn't even know I had. It was a mode of absolute, unwavering focus. I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I didn't confront Preston with tearful accusations or show even the slightest sign that I knew my entire world had been turned upside down. Every morning, I still woke up on time, made coffee, got ready for work, and smiled at my husband as he knotted his tie, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. He just hadn't realized it yet. He was living in a comfortable illusion, and I was the one carefully maintaining it. At work, I was a fortress of professionalism. I led my marketing team through the quarterly campaign launch, closing a major deal with a national retail chain that boosted our projected revenue by a staggering 15%. The CEO even invited me to join a strategic expansion meeting for the Asian market, a sign of immense trust and a huge step up in my new role. The work was a welcome refuge, a place where I was in complete control, where my contributions were valued, where I was seen as competent and strong. Meanwhile, Preston and Sabrina became increasingly, recklessly bold, their arrogance blinding them to the possibility of consequences. Sabrina strutted through the halls of our office building as if she were on a runway, her pencil skirts growing shorter, her blouses more sheer. And Preston, my husband, no longer seemed interested in even pretending to hide anything. I caught them alone in an empty conference room once, laughing together, their heads close, like they were sharing a private joke at the world's expense. Another time, walking past the legal department, I saw Sabrina leaning over Preston's desk, her hand resting on his for just a moment too long. Most people would overlook it, dismiss it as a friendly gesture. But I wasn't most people anymore. I was documenting everything. I kept a small, plain notebook in the locked drawer of my desk at work. In it, I logged every time Sabrina entered Preston's office and for how long, every lunch break they disappeared together, every odd-timed internal email I saw exchanged between them. Using the contact Brenda had given me, I obtained the keycard logs. They were a damning testament to their lies, showing Preston and Sabrina entering the office building together on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and leaving together late at night, long after everyone else had gone home. I even hired that freelance IT assistant, a quiet genius who had worked with us during last year's security upgrade, to help me discreetly recover meeting logs that Preston had accidentally deleted from the company's shared server. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, was scanned, saved in my encrypted cloud folder, with backup copies sent immediately and silently to Ms. Vance. I also began to use Sabrina's own provocations to build my case. She seemed to get a thrill from pushing the limits, from taunting me in plain sight. Last week, during the company-wide town hall meeting, Sabrina walked past me in the coffee line, holding a steaming mug. She smiled that sickly sweet smile of hers. "Congrats on the new campaign, Audrey," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity, her eyes sparkling with a hint of a challenge. "I've heard Preston say you're incredibly talented. He talks about you all the time." I smiled back, a calm, unreadable expression on my face. "Thanks, Sabrina. I'm really glad he's found someone he works so well with. You two seem to have great synergy." Sabrina flinched, just slightly, but her smile wavered. She hadn't expected that. She had expected tears, or anger. She quickly recovered. "You know, working with Preston is more interesting than I ever expected." I tilted my head, still smiling my serene, polite smile. "I can imagine. But you should be careful. The company has very strict policies about unclear relationships in the workplace. It can get messy, especially when it affects professional judgment and creates potential conflicts of interest. I'd hate for anyone's career to be compromised over a misunderstanding." Her smile tightened for a split second, all the fake warmth gone from her eyes. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking in angry, retreating rhythm on the polished floor. Exactly as I had predicted, overconfident, and now, a little bit rattled. I didn't need a loud confrontation. I just needed time and observation. They were getting careless. I would catch messages flashing across Preston's laptop screen when he forgot to lock it at home. Things like, "I wish you were staying with me tonight," or "We can't keep hiding forever, can we?" Each message was another puzzle piece, and I was almost done building the entire, damning picture. I sent the latest batch of materials to Ms. Vance with a simple note, "We're getting close." She replied with one line, "Wait for the perfect moment to go public. Don't rush." And then, that moment arrived in my inbox. An internal email went out company-wide, "Next week's annual gala will be held at the Fairmont Hotel. Attendance is mandatory for all management-level staff." I stared at the announcement on my screen, and then, for the first time in weeks, a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. The gala. Where all eyes would be on the company's leadership, where reputations and personal images would be on full display. The perfect stage for a final act. The night of the gala, the Fairmont Hotel was transformed, sparkling like a scene out of a classic Hollywood movie. The grand ballroom was lined with a plush red carpet, flanked by velvet ropes. Soft music from a live jazz band floated from a corner of the room, and the gentle, constant clinking of champagne glasses mixed with the murmur of laughter and congratulations, painting the perfect picture of elite corporate society at its most glamorous. I walked into it all wearing an emerald silk gown that was cinched at the waist, its long train trailing elegantly behind each deliberate step. My hair was swept into a sleek, sophisticated updo, showing off my delicate neckline and slim shoulders. The entire look was not designed to allure anyone, but to serve as armor, a reminder to myself of who I was, poised, in control, and unbreakable. I wasn't here to react to their drama. I was here to end it. Heads turned as I entered the ballroom. It wasn't just because of the dress, but because of the quiet, dignified silence that had followed me like a shadow these past few weeks. Everyone in the senior management circle had heard the whispers, the rumors that swirled around the office like smoke. But no one, not a single person, had dared to ask me about them. I smiled politely, nodded at each curious glance that came my way, and accepted a flute of champagne from a passing server, my hand perfectly steady. Across the room, I saw Daisy and the rest of the marketing team waving me over to their table. They looked excited and proud. But before I could move in their direction, a small, palpable ripple stirred through the crowd. Heads turned in unison. Someone near me whispered Preston's name. I turned. He appeared exactly as I had expected, looking handsome and dashing in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. And on his arm, one hand resting lightly and possessively on the small of her back, was Sabrina Turner. She wore a glittering, backless silver gown with a daringly high slit, the kind of dress not meant for a corporate event but for a red carpet premiere. She smiled sweetly up at him, her bright red lips catching the light from the massive crystal chandeliers that hung from the ceiling like constellations. They entered the room as if they were a celebrity couple making their grand debut, hand in hand, unapologetic and radiating a defiant boldness. The whispers around me grew louder. I heard my own name scattered among the murmurs, but I didn't care. In fact, a strange sense of calm washed over me. This was it. This was them, showing their true colors for all the world to see, just as I had hoped they would. They were about to hand me everything I needed. Preston saw me standing there, alone, across the crowded room. He paused for a fraction of a second, his confident stride faltering as our eyes met. I could see a flicker of something in his expression, surprise, maybe even a hint of guilt. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a hard, defiant look. Then, as if to prove something to me, to the room, to himself, he leaned down and whispered something into Sabrina's ear. She laughed, a high, tinkling, theatrical sound, tilting her head back dramatically. And right there, in the center of the ballroom, in front of the entire company, our executives, our colleagues, and me, Preston kissed her. It wasn't a quick, discreet peck on the lips. It was a long, deliberate, passionate kiss, a kiss designed to be seen, a statement. It was long enough for people to start shifting uncomfortably on their feet, for conversations to die down into a shocked, awkward silence. It was bold enough to turn every whispered rumor into undeniable, glaring truth. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I simply lifted my champagne glass and tilted it ever so slightly in their direction, a silent, ironic toast. A faint smile brushed my lips. There was no trembling in my hand, no tears welling in my eyes. Just a calm, quiet acknowledgement of the spectacle. Preston finally pulled back from the kiss and looked straight at me, a smug, triumphant look on his face. But when he saw my reaction, or rather, my lack of one, his expression faltered. Maybe he had expected me to turn and run out of the room in tears. Maybe he had hoped I would cause a scene, scream at him, confirming his narrative that I was the hysterical, emotional wife. But instead, I just raised my glass a little higher and gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if I were thanking him for the wonderful, irrefutable piece of evidence he had just delivered to me, all wrapped up with a dramatic bow. I saw the color drain from his face, his look of triumph slipping into one of deep, dawning uncertainty. He had played his big, dramatic card, expecting to win the game, and he had no idea that he had just handed me the victory. Brenda materialized at my side, her own red dress as bold as the protective fire in her eyes. She leaned in and whispered, her voice a low growl, "Are you ready?" I set my now empty glass on a nearby tray with a soft click. More than ever. The loudspeaker announced the start of the awards ceremony. We all moved into the adjoining auditorium. I took my seat at a table right at the front, among the senior leadership, a position that had been arranged in advance and was a key part of the strategy one had carefully planned with Brenda's subtle help from inside HR. Brenda sat beside me, while Preston and Sabrina were placed at a table near the very back of the vast room. HR, it turned out, didn't assign seating entirely at random. When my name was called for excellence in marketing strategy for exceeding our quarterly revenue targets, the applause sounded distant in my ears. I walked up to the stage, my steps even and confident. I took the microphone from the stand and looked around the room, letting my gaze linger for just a moment on the back table, where those two were trying to pretend that nothing had just happened. Every eye in the room was on me. I smiled, a warm, professional smile. I began my speech like a model executive. I thanked my incredible team, the supportive board of directors, and I shared a few well-rehearsed words about the importance of work ethic and innovation. Then, I paused. The silence in the room was absolute. My voice softened, but my eyes never left Preston. I also want to thank this company, I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the room, for creating and upholding a transparent work environment, one where professional ethics are held to the highest possible standard. I firmly believe that no matter what we achieve, no matter how high we climb, integrity is non-negotiable. A few people in the audience glanced at each other, a ripple of understanding passing through the room. No one said a word, but I saw Preston tense up, his hands clenching into tight white fists on the tablecloth. Sabrina lowered her head, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. I ended my speech with a line that felt as light as air but was designed to land with the force of a hammer. And sometimes, I said, my smile unwavering, all it takes is quiet observation for the truth to reveal itself. The room erupted in applause, louder and longer than before. I stepped down from the stage, my head held high, my heart feeling lighter and freer than it had in a very long time. Because truthfully, the wound had already started to heal the moment I had stopped crying and started planning. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 below. That way, I'll know you've given me a like, and I'll understand that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me, more than you know. Please, comment with the number 1, and listen as I continue my story. On Monday morning, the office air was unusually quiet, thick with an unspoken tension, like the heavy, electric stillness before a thunderstorm. I arrived earlier than usual, stepping into the elevator with a hot latte in one hand and a completely new, unburdened mindset. The night before, after leaving the gala, I hadn't gone home to the apartment I still shared with Preston. I had checked into a hotel. There, I spent 3 hours in my quiet room, sitting in front of my laptop. I reviewed every single file one last time. Each screenshot of a message, every damning photo, every audio recording of a suspicious voicemail, and of course, the crystal-clear video of Preston and Sabrina kissing in the ballroom, which a sympathetic colleague from the events team had discreetly sent to my personal email with the subject line "For your records." Everything was carefully stored, clearly labeled, time-stamped, and geotagged. It was a fortress of evidence. I opened my work email and calmly drafted 3 separate messages. The first email was addressed to the head of human resources and the company's chief legal counsel. The subject line was simple and direct: formal report of workplace conduct violations. In the body of the email, I attached a neatly organized zip file containing all the evidence. I clearly outlined the violations, including the inappropriate and ongoing relationship between a senior in-house attorney and a senior consultant in the same department. I specifically highlighted actions that could lead to serious conflicts of interest, potential abuse of power, and the creation of a toxic work environment for other employees. I framed it not as a personal grievance, but as a significant corporate liability. The second email was addressed to the company's entire executive board. I used no emotional language whatsoever. Every sentence was precise, professional, and factual, like a report from a senior leader committed to protecting the integrity and reputation of the organization. The third and most important email was sent to the 3 managing partners at the prestigious law firm where Preston held a senior attorney position. I clearly and calmly stated that their legal representative, while acting on behalf of their firm within our corporate offices, had engaged in behavior that breached fundamental ethical standards, thereby damaging the image and professional relationship between our 2 organizations. I implied, subtly but clearly, that our multi-million-dollar account with their firm was now under review. I signed each email with my full, official title, Audrey Wells, Senior Marketing Director. Lastly, I opened the sleek leather briefcase Ms. Vance had given me and pulled out a dark blue folder stamped with her firm's elegant logo. Inside was the divorce petition, meticulously prepared and ready to be filed. It also contained a highlighted copy of the prenuptial agreement Preston had so arrogantly insisted on before our wedding. He was so confident when he signed it, but he had obviously never bothered to carefully read Clause 17.3. It stated, in clear, unambiguous legal language, in the event that Party A, Preston Wells, breaches the obligation of fidelity and thereby damages the reputation or professional standing of Party B, Audrey Wells, in the workplace or the professional community, all protections for Party A's individual assets, including but not limited to stocks, bonuses, and retirement funds accrued during the marriage, will be rendered void. I looked at the clock on my computer screen. 7:59 a.m. I took a final, deep breath and moved my cursor to the Send All button. At 8 a.m. sharp, I clicked it. All 3 emails were sent simultaneously. At 8:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Brenda. The game has just started. At 8:15 a.m., I saw Preston walk into the office from my window. His face was relaxed, he was actually whistling, likely still basking in the arrogant illusion of his victory at the gala. He didn't even glance toward my office. Sabrina followed a few steps behind him, a triumphant, self-satisfied smile plastered on her face. They barely had time to set their bags down before the intercom on Preston's desk buzzed harshly. He was summoned to HR on the 12th floor. 2 minutes later, Sabrina was summoned as well. Moments later, the executive assistant to our CEO, a stern woman who rarely left the top floor, came down in person and walked straight into the HR conference room. Not long after, a representative from Preston's law firm, a man in a severe silver suit with a tense, grim face, showed up in our lobby. He said it all without saying a word. I didn't move from my desk. I sat calmly in my office, opened the Q2 marketing strategy report, and began reviewing timelines and budget allocations. The chaos was unfolding outside my door, but inside my office, there was only calm, quiet focus. At 10:07 a.m., my personal phone rang. It was Ms. Vance. Preston's side just received the divorce notice via courier. They are, to put it mildly, stunned. They are asking for an emergency private meeting before things go public. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted rich and wonderful. We'll go through the attorneys, I said calmly. I have nothing to say to him personally. Exactly what I told them, Ms. Vance replied, a clear note of satisfaction in her voice. And one more thing, Audrey. They had no idea you had such comprehensive evidence. His lawyer seemed to think this was just a case of a jealous wife. The gala video sealed it. It's undeniable. I gave a soft, humorless laugh. No one, I said, looking out at the bay, should ever start a war without preparing the battlefield first. In the 3 weeks that followed that eventful Monday, the atmosphere in the office completely transformed. The tense, whispered conversations stopped. Instead, a new kind of respectful silence filled the room whenever I entered a meeting or walked down the hall. No one asked me any personal questions about Preston or Sabrina. They didn't need to. The corporate grapevine had done its work. Everyone knew what had happened, and more importantly, they knew who had come out of the storm standing tall, not with hysterics, but with cold, hard strategy. Sabrina Turner's contract was officially terminated after a grueling, 5-hour internal hearing with HR and the legal department. The reason stated in the brief, company-wide memo was a serious violation of professional ethics and company conduct policies. HR didn't need to elaborate. The gala video, which had mysteriously circulated among all the senior staff, had said everything that needed to be said. The day Sabrina packed up her desk, I was in a long meeting with a client on an upper floor, but Daisy, my assistant, saw the whole thing. She later described it to me in hushed tones. She wore a big hat and dark sunglasses, but everyone knew it was her, Daisy whispered. She just packed her box and left. No one said a word to her. No one even saw her off. I simply nodded, offering no comment. I didn't feel any joy from her public humiliation, I just felt the quiet, satisfying click of justice being served. As for Preston, he was immediately placed on administrative leave during the internal investigation. His law firm, a powerful entity that prided itself on its pristine reputation, initially tried to handle the situation quietly, hoping the issue would blow over. But they didn't know that I had already sent a complete, notarized set of evidence, including proof of him using his corporate expense account for hotel rooms and dinners with Sabrina, to the California State Bar the week before. Faced with a formal ethics investigation and the immediate loss of our company as a major client, the firm had no choice. They terminated his employment for serious ethical violations damaging the firm's image and client trust. I know he tried to reach out. The first desperate message came 2 days after his dismissal. Hey, can we talk? This isn't how things were supposed to end. I read it, and I deleted it without a response. The second message came a week later, this time from his personal email address, long and rambling. I was wrong, I know, but you went too far, Audrey. You didn't have to do this. You destroyed my career. I deleted it without reading the rest. His career? He had destroyed our marriage, our future, our trust. His career was just collateral damage of his own making. The last I heard of Preston was from Brenda. A friend of hers had recently moved to San Diego and had spotted him working at a small, low-profile law office on the outskirts of the city, the kind that handled minor civil cases and DUIs. He looked worn out, Brenda had told me over the phone, her voice a strange mix of pity and cool detachment. My friend said he was sitting in a cheap coffee shop, his hair a mess, flipping through case files like he was trying to remember who he used to be. I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, no satisfaction. Just nothing. A quiet emptiness where my love for him used to be. As for Sabrina, I ran into her by pure chance 2 weeks ago. I was having dinner with Brenda at a small, unassuming diner in Oakland. When I walked in, I saw a familiar figure carrying a heavy tray at the service counter. It was Sabrina, dressed in a drab gray and black uniform with a greasy restaurant logo apron tied around her waist. She was almost unrecognizable without her designer clothes, perfect makeup, and arrogant smirk. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the noisy diner, and I saw a flicker of raw, humiliating embarrassment in hers before she quickly looked away. I didn't look away. I didn't smile smugly or sneer. I simply held her gaze for a moment, and then offered a soft, neutral smile, the kind of smile you give a stranger, a smile that said, "You no longer have any power over me. You no longer exist in my world." She turned her back quickly, avoiding our table for the rest of the evening. As we walked out into the cool night air, Brenda turned to me and asked, "How did it feel, seeing her like that?" I shrugged, looking up at the golden lights lining the street. Nothing special. Things happen as they should. 3 months after Preston was officially scrubbed from the company roster, I walked into the executive boardroom with a completely different mindset. That morning, our CEO had invited me to his office on the 24th floor, the floor usually reserved only for the C-suite and those on the company's succession planning list. I had assumed it was about the brand expansion project into the Canadian market that I was leading, but it wasn't. He handed me a sleek black folder, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "We've been watching closely how you handled the recent crisis, Audrey," he said. professional, measured, and above all, with incredible strength and integrity. You protected this company's reputation while navigating an impossible personal situation. We believe it's time to recognize that. He slid the folder across the polished table. We're promoting you to Chief Marketing Officer. I opened the folder and looked at the confirmation document. The new title, the new responsibilities, the new salary, it was nearly double what I had been making. I didn't need to think twice. Thank you, sir, I said, my voice steady and clear. I'm ready. And I truly was. I was ready for a new chapter, one with no shadows, no sweet lies, and no more secret glances hidden behind frosted glass. A few weeks later, I moved into a new apartment. My apartment. It was on the 18th floor of a modern glass tower overlooking the San Francisco Bay. It wasn't lavishly large like the home I had shared with Preston, but it was minimalist, elegant, and so quiet that each morning, I could hear the faint cry of seagulls as they glided past my window. There was no more kitchen corner where I used to sit and wait for Preston to come home every night. There was no more bedroom filled with the suffocating feeling of betrayal. Everything here was new, clean, and untouched by the past. Including me. I bought a beautiful, comfortable gray velvet armchair and placed it by the floor-to-ceiling window. Every evening now, I sit there, sip a glass of crisp white wine, listen to my favorite jazz playlist, and read a book. There is no rushing, no anxious checking of my phone for messages, no listening for the sound of a key in the lock. Preston had still tried to text me once a week like clockwork for a while, as if he was fulfilling some duty to his own guilty conscience. I miss you. I know I was wrong. Can we please just start over? I never replied, not out of bitterness, but simply because I had nothing left to say to him. He was the one who had walked away from our marriage long before I ever knew it. Once, he called. I saw his name flash on my screen, and for a second, my heart jumped. But I didn't answer. I just watched as the phone rang out 5 times and then faded to silence. Then, I calmly blocked his number, an act that felt like closing a heavy, rotten door, finally sealing it shut with nothing left to hold on to. Brenda visited last week, bringing lemon tarts from my favorite bakery in Fillmore. She stepped inside my new place, looked around at the airy, light-filled space, and let out a low whistle. Wow, Audrey. This apartment is the perfect upgrade. I laughed, a real, easy laugh, as I handed her a glass of wine. Exactly. The apartment, and the woman who lives in it. We sat by the window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle on as dusk fell over the bay. You know, Brenda said after a comfortable, quiet pause, her eyes softening. I was so scared you were going to fall apart back then. But you didn't just get up. You walked away like you never even fell. I was silent for a moment, not because of the compliment, but because I knew what it had taken to get here. I had been at the absolute bottom of every emotion, shame, hurt, self-doubt. But from that dark, deep place, I had learned how to rebuild myself, brick by brick. Not through vengeance, but through quiet, resolute growth. That night, I posted a photo of the sparkling city view from my apartment window on Instagram. The caption was simple: living well is not revenge. It's freedom. And now, sitting here, in my peaceful new home, taking the last sip of wine for the day, I finally, truly understand what that means. The sweetest revenge isn't making someone else hurt. It's not hurting because of them anymore. Life isn't always fair, but how we face that unfairness is what defines our true worth. I once placed my entire trust in the wrong person, and I fell because of a betrayal I thought was unforgivable. But I chose to rise, to watch in silence, and to act when the time was right. The freedom, the success, and the profound peace I have now didn't come from revenge. They came from no longer letting the past, or him, control me. Living well, on my own terms, is the strongest answer of all. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it with you. What do you think of the decisions I made? Could you have done the same in my situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you have a story of your own, please know that you are not alone. Thank you for being here with me.